Welcome to Dine with the Divine. My name is Ashley. I'm your host, and today we'll be exploring the magical, the mystical, historical, our ancestors, everything and everything in between. So on today's episode, we're going to be traveling all the way to the Middle East, and we're going to get to talk about two really cool ride or die ladies. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming back. So on today's show, I'm very excited. We're going to welcome in Reverend Joya Sosnowski. Reverend Joya is a channel for the power of sound vibrations and sacred oils to help people live their best vibe. She is committed to bridging spirituality, science, and psychology through her studies of quantum and neuroscience, and through her studies of the Aramaic teachings of Yeshua. In addition to her certifications and continual studies in the realm of sound healing, she is a Divine Sciences New Thought Reverend, a USM spiritual psychology coach, and a certified mindfulness trainer. Her mission in life is the liberation of suffering and to see the nafsha, or soul self, awaken and express in every human being. I love that. She's the author of Practical Spirituality, 15 Practices for Bringing Heaven to Earth. Also love that. She leads sacred retreats for women to sing, drum, and embody their divine self at sacred sites around the world. Okay, so I saw you on Instagram, and I just love, like, your whole vibe is so beautiful. And I was like, I just have to talk to this person.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you just have like a great I don't know. It's so funny because like Instagram and social media, it's like it really means nothing. But there are some people who you see and you're just like, wow, they really truly express who they are through this like online medium, which is nice. Instead of just seeing things that like make you sad or whatever, you express it in a really nice way. And I really just enjoyed looking at your page. That's why I was like, oh, let me see if I can reach out to this person. She seems really, really nice. So, couple questions for you because all your biography, like there's so many interesting things in it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I have to ask you about everything. So, so, so first and foremost, what put you on a path to this like kind of spiritual life and this kind of awakening that you seem to have had, and it's just really beautiful. So, what kind of put you on the path to doing that?
Mm. Oh boy. Well, honestly, I know that I've always been spiritual, but it just went dormant when I
Mm-hmm.
was a kid, and probably when I remember being really young and being very spiritual, very connected to guides and angels, and especially Mary Magdalene. Like I used to play with her in the woods, and I wanted to be a priest when I grew up. I used to line up my stuffed animals and play church with them, and and but then due to a traumatic childhood in my teenage years, all of that just went out the window. And
Mm,
I was in survival mode, right? So,
yeah.
you know, after I had a near death experience when I was 21 from a suicide attempt,
Mm.
and I heard the most beautiful music of heaven that I've ever heard in my entire life. And I would like to say the next day I picked up my sound bowls and became a sound healer, but that's not what happened at all. My stubborn self went on a mission of healing, but I was trying to heal rationally, logically. I was trying to heal with my mind, right? I was trying to
Mm-hmm.
heal from the point of the ego and trying to solve the problems of my spirit, the problems of my soul, utilizing my mind. And so, fast forward to having babies, getting married, career burnout, all of that, pretending to be perfect, like that whole fake facade that people do, that I did. I had a stress induced nervous breakdown about 12 years ago, and I found myself again feeling suicidal, again on the verge of just total emptiness. I was drinking a lot. I was
Mm.
keeping myself super busy. I was eating a lot, like anything to numb and check out. And I had two small kids. So that was just
Mhm.
not exactly the best modeling, right? So then, of course, the voice in my head, because of the things I was doing, the voice in my head that was always my worst enemy was saying, "You're a terrible mother.
Mm.
You're just like your mom. Your children they don't even need you. They deserve a better mother." So I was like going off the deep end. And
Mhm.
thankfully, I discovered mindfulness based stress reduction. And so I took an MBSR course, And in that 8 weeks, I noticed such a profound change in my noticing of my thought processes that I just threw myself into mindfulness. So I'm getting around to answering the question because it's
That's
funny.
okay. I have now like 17 other questions to ask you. This is
But it's
fascinating.
important because it's like this became like the whole focus of my work, because then what happened was, after practicing mindfulness and meditation, I accidentally woke up. I accidentally
Mm.
became spiritual. So it was very, very, very unexpected for me to arrive at the place. And I literally remember the first day I was going to make a spiritual post on my Facebook page, where up to that point I had been like, neuroscience and mindfulness and this and facts and data and, the whole brain thing. And I was like, God. And it was a totally terrifying leap for me to take, which is so funny because now if you see my Instagram, you can't even imagine that I would have ever been like, I don't want to talk about God. But but it just became like, I really came to feel like the mind can only take us so far, and then we come to this threshold point where we have to take that leap where spirit takes us the rest of the way. It's like you've gone as far as you can go with the thinking mind, with the ego, with the noticing, with the awareness. And now are you going to surrender to something else that you can't explain? And I said,
Yes.
yes, I will do that. And that was in September of 2018. And then by September of 2019, I had already changed so much. That was when I decided to stop dyeing my hair. So in that year, I changed a lot. But then from 2019 to now, I'm like literally a different person.
Oh my God. I just, everything you said is like, yes, 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 yes. Um, okay. So, oh my God, so many things. So, first of all, I love, like, I feel like so many, okay, first of all, like society, like kind of like you said, you're like, you did everything that you were like supposed to do. And society tells us that, and people get me too. I've gotten so stuck in that sometimes. So then when I'm not where I'm supposed to be, like, oh, I didn't have kids yet, or I didn't get married or whatever, you start to really feel like you're failing. And like so many people end up staying in that place, you know what I mean? And end up with like so many more problems because they thought that they're supposed to be this person when like you are supposed to be whoever you were supposed to be. You don't have to do everything the way everybody else tells you. And also, kind of like what you were saying, I've been at that place too where it's like, I literally have been trying to figure this out and I cannot figure out what to do. So I'm just gonna like let go. I always say let go and let God because like I don't know. Like this is beyond me at this point. Like I can't, earthly me can't fix this. So like I need supernatural intervention. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
It's the only thing that will help. It really,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
It's insane. Yeah. So like, oh my God, your story is just really interesting. And I feel like that resonates with a lot of people. And a lot of people, unfortunately, sometimes don't get to the point where they can admit to themselves that they can't handle it. And then they always think it's like them. They're like, oh, it's like kind of like you were saying, you're like, oh, you got to a point where you're thinking, like, oh, I'm a bad mom and thinking all these things. It's like, no, it's just like you have a lot. There's just a lot going on. And sometimes you just need something. Some people, and I think it's different for everybody, but you were lucky and blessed to find what you needed and to then have it evolve to even make a better you, like to make a even more healthy, beautiful, even greater version of you. And that is so honorable. Like I love that about you. Like that's fantastic. I'm so glad that I've gotten to know you already. Like I feel like I feel like this is great. Like that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And
And the interesting thing I just want to say is
absolutely.
I don't feel like I've become a better me or a different me. I feel like I've returned to who I already always was. And I just stopped being all of the things of my ego. I stopped being my wounded past. I stopped being a story of my trauma. I stopped being a story of my epigenetics that were passed down from my mom, from her mom, from her mom, from her mom. I stopped being all of those stories, all of those things, all of those false beliefs, everything put on. And it really honestly feels like to me, and maybe it does to you being a spiritual woman too, that I feel like I've actually woken up. Like when they say awakening, I'm like, it feels like I awakened to this true self that's always been there all along. Like there's a sense of familiarity about it.
Yeah, you know what? That is so, so true. And like when you're saying that, I'm like, yes, that really does resonate with me too, because I felt like I was actually having this conversation the other day. I feel that a lot of people carry, they label themselves, kind of like you were saying just now, they label themselves by their traumas, by, their ancestral traumas. And it's like, you kind of, and I've done this, I ended up kind of living that. And like anytime something bad happened or like it didn't work out, I was like, well, that's just because nothing works out for me. And like, this is just how it is. And like, I really was like living my trauma and just being like, well, this is how it is. And like, not realizing that number one, I was just being a victim all the time. Like, and I continuously victimized myself.
Right.
Yeah. And then also, I always had to be this like martyr. Like, for me, it was like I would do all these things and then be like, oh, nobody cares about me. Nobody wanted to help me. But it's like, I also just didn't have to do it. But I was continuing like my own trauma because I like didn't know how else to deal with it. And not being in this place of like anger that I was in, I didn't know how to not be that. And I didn't know what I would have been. I was like, I'm afraid. And I realized that when I started to kind of become more spiritual and learn more about myself and my ego, I realized how fearful I was of not being angry. Because I was like, if I'm not angry, who am I? I've been angry for so long. And like, that was so, I had almost like a spiritual nervous breakdown. Because like, I was working with a mentor and I got to this place where I had to like kind of confront some childhood stuff and realized that like I wasn't the person who I thought I was. I was like, oh no, I'm keeping it together. Like I was not keeping it together at all. Like I was doing a terrible job. Everyone saw I was doing a terrible job except me. I was like, no, everything's fine. Everyone's like, okay, girl.
We're so blind to our stuff. It's so funny. I'm like, nobody knows that I'm drinking wine at 3 o'clock every day. Nobody knows that.
I know. Even when like when I was away at college for a while, I was like, oh, I'm fine. Drinking. When I wasn't somebody who drank that much, but like I couldn't stop. I was drinking, and I was like, no, I'm fine. I would go home like every weekend because I was miserable. But my mom was like, yeah, I thought something was wrong with you. I was like, really? She's like, yes, you were miserable. Like you were so unhappy. You were arguing with everybody all the time. So it's like, yeah, we're so blind, and when we're trying to cover it up, we always think we're doing a great job, but everyone around us is like, oh my, is she okay? Like, what's going on over there?
And that's like that's the amazing way that the ego tricks your own self, right? It tricks you. And then it's got all these different masks that we hide behind. And it can be like mine was, I'm going to be cold-hearted and intellectual, and I will just out rationalize you in any argument.
Yes.
Versus angry. I bet people are angry, or the over emotional victim. You can't say anything to them because they're just going to start crying and you're afraid to say anything to them. So there's like all these different ways, and I just really want to like commend you for taking personal responsibility and seeing. You're like, oh, I mean, you're so young, and for you to already pick it up and be like, oh, maybe it's me. Like that is so awesome.
Thank you. Trust me, it took a while and it took a lot of crying for me to be like, huh, maybe I'm actually doing some of this to myself. And I think that I learned so many lessons about like meeting people where they're at. Sometimes realizing that some people are just the way they are. And sometimes you either have to just be like, I'm cutting this person off and I'm not going to deal with it. Or you have to kind of accept it. You can pick one, either one is fine, whatever the person's situation is. But like, you gotta kind of work through things and not, because the more you ignore certain things, the worse it gets. Like, so I used to be a very like, I'll just put this on the back burner. And then one day everything just like, ooh, boiled over. But
those tolerations, right? It's like what we tolerate is what rules our life. Really. So it's about not tolerating, like taking those tolerations off that we don't, first and foremost, we don't tolerate it from ourselves. Like we don't sacrifice our well-being for somebody else's well-being. That just doesn't make any sense.
I know. And for so long, I thought that sacrificing myself was like love for other people. I was like, no, this is how I show I love people. It's just like, I do all this stuff. I burn myself out. I cry all day because I had to do all this stuff, but it's just because I love them. But like, That's not love. And at the end of the day, I feel terrible. And if the people who do really love me, don't want me to do that. Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And when, did you find when you were in that energy that you attract energy vampires?
Oh, oh. So I used to, and my mom will like say to this day, I used to say to my mom, like, but like, I feel like all I do is give to people and they don't give me anything back. And my mom's like, well, you don't have to do that. And I'd be like, no, but I have to because I want to be nice. And like, it just, but it took me so long to realize it. And then I did have so many people in my life who I ended up cutting out because I realized, like, wow, these people actually make me feel bad. Like, they're not making me feel good. And I'm pouring out for them for no reason. And, there's people, of course, I pour out for people I love, but eventually you're just like, oh, these people, they don't love me back. And all they want to do is take, take, take. So I'm like, I have to let that go. Like, it was too much.
Yeah. And you know the ones you have to let go when you start setting boundaries and they don't like it.
Oh,
Right.
that is the truth. When you start, I realize so many people, the people who I like, especially friends, like people who I'm friends with, when I started setting boundaries, I had so many people fall off and it was beautiful. I didn't realize it because I'd be like, oh, I don't talk to so and so anymore. But I realized, wow. And then the people who I do set boundaries with, and they're like, yeah, girl, whatever you need. Like, that's fine. Okay, cool. It was like, wow, like you care about me and I care about you. This is how real relationships are supposed to be. Like, this is
It's
amazing.
beautiful. I
I
love that.
know. Oh, so I also wanted to ask you okay, so you are New Thought Reverend. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is New Thought? I'm just so interested. I don't know anything about that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. New Thought came around in the late 1800s. And
Okay.
it's pretty much the teachings that everybody's espousing now. The law of attraction,
Mm,
like all of that stuff came about in the 1800s. The New Thought divine sciences, which I love so much. These sisters started this in Denver in the 1800s, and they were very much about the omnipresence of God is everywhere and in everyone and in everything, and it's in
mm.
us, and that we are living expressions of the one source creator. And when I remember when the first time I read that, I was like, this feels like it makes so much sense to me. This
Yeah.
feels like it was what Jesus was trying to teach us when
Mhm.
he was like, you guys are it. You have it in you. It's like you can do all these things and greater things than I can do. So the new thought teachers are like all of those old timey teachers from the early 1900s, late 1800s, like Troward, the guy who wrote uh, Think and Grow Rich, like during that
Mhm.
whole time, right? So these are all of these teachers, these new thought teachers that came about. But now, 100 years later, it's now picking up steam and energy that it's like in the common language now for everybody. And I'm like, this is so great. So
That's
yeah, that's who they are. Yeah.
yeah. So and that's like a lot of the thought that like tell me if I'm wrong, but like the divine lives within us. And like, I feel like, especially back then, that was probably so radical.
Oh, it was so bad.
People were probably so mad.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. It's like, oh, you and yeah, those were the people were probably like, you're going straight to hell. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. They were like, wait, we don't like, because I feel very strongly about like, yes, the divine being part of every person. And also like people pray so much like, oh, we're just gonna pray to this God, pray, pray, pray. But I'm like, well, if God is part of you, number one, however you feel and however you're made is good. Like there's something good, even if you feel like you do bad things or whatever. But also it takes away that fear. Some like
Yeah,
a lot of churches and not just Christian churches, but all over the world, different religions, they rule by fear. You
totally.
will go to this bad place when you die, or this terrible thing will happen when you die. You'll come back as this or whatever. And it takes away so much of that fear. It's just like, oh, wait, I am part of the divine. So if I'm just like cool, like everything will be fine. Like, and if I just think well and try my best, okay.
Yeah, it's in you, right? So it's like my favorite way of saying it was comes from another New Thought teacher, John Randolph Price, and he said, I was like, that's it right there. And he said, God is all of me, but I am not all of God. So it takes off that whole thing, like I'm so like it takes the ego out of the equation. It's like
Yes.
I'm the sunbeam of the sun. I'm a drop of the ocean. That doesn't make me the whole ocean. I have
Yes.
all of the ocean in me. Its ingredients are in me, but I'm not the whole ocean. And I feel like the same thing is true of God, that I'm like, God is in me. God is in you.
Hmm.
We have that source in us, which means we have access to it. We can tune into it. And like my whole work now is like your body is a spiritual technology. That's exact. I'm like all of my studies in neuroscience and all of my nerding and geeking out for 20 years. I'm like, oh, that was why. And so I could explain it and see and connect it, that I'm like, oh, the body's a spiritual technology. We're wired to be connected to source when we get our thinking ego out of the way and we stop thinking that we're it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's so funny, like the amount of, now you obviously have studied things like this, like neuroscience and quantum stuff. I don't get it, but you are a very intelligent person, and I admire all the people who do. But all I know is that I hear it, like people talk about quantum physics and stuff, and it makes it, I love that people are studying that, especially people who are kind of spiritually inclined, because it really is bringing that bridge to people be like, well, I don't get it. There's no like science and faith. But I'm like, no, but there's tons, I don't understand it, but there's tons of people who are studying it. And it sounds like there's, correlations. So it's really,
There
really
are.
neat.
Yeah, I just have it as, people, ancient spiritual teachers who've been teaching this stuff for eons, learned it through lived experience, through practices, and then they became it, right? So they
Yeah.
got in touch with this energy. And so then as scientists study all this stuff, then all they're doing is validating what spiritual teachers have already known from lived experience. They're just explaining how it's done. Although, except in the case of quantum physics, they're pretty much like, we don't know. We have no idea. We don't know. We just know that this is what happens. And all of us spiritual people are like, yep, yeah,
Yeah, we're like, well, we kind of know. They're like, yeah, but it's a mystery. We're like, well, it's kind of a mystery, but I don't know. That's awesome.
that I love that so many of them have come to the conclusion that there has to be a creator. Like
Hmm.
it's just so mathematically perfect. It's
Yes.
so mysterious and so vast and incomprehensible that they're like, it's not all an accident. There's no way. Yeah.
It's insane. Even when I was in like college, I took like anatomy, and when I was learning anatomy, I would be like, "What?" Like the way everything is just connected in your body and works together. I'm
Yeah.
just like, this is insane. It makes no sense. Like that somebody was just like, you know what I'm gonna do? Your heart's gonna pump this way, but it's gonna deliver all this blood to all here, but then it's also gonna do this, and then this is. It's like, come on, like it doesn't. No person is this smart. It's just,
Right? To create that. Exactly.
yeah. There's
No
still,
way.
exactly. There's things in your body that doctors still don't understand why it happens. They're like, this just happens sometimes. It's insane.
Mm. Yeah. And there is no such thing as junk DNA. I'm like, that
Mhm.
no, it got disconnected somehow, but it's not junk.
No,
It has a
everything,
purpose.
everything has a purpose, and it's just amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So this is great. So, okay. So we're gonna go on to our next part of the show. Where we're gonna talk about food now. Very
My
exciting.
favorite subject.
Exactly. So, every week we have a dish of the week, and I know you said you're vegan, right?
Most of the time. I do eat
Most of the
chicken
time.
every now and then, but
No problem.
90% vegan. Yeah.
Sounds awesome. So I was like, let me pick a dish for her that's vegan. And I know you recently went to Egypt.
I did.
Yes, I saw your pictures on Instagram. Beautiful. So I was like, all right, we're gonna do some Egyptian food because you'll see why we're also talking about some Egyptian stuff later on. So I found this dish that sounds really good. It's called mudmas. Fal mudmas. I phonetically wrote it out. Sorry to anybody who actually speaks Arabic. I apologize. I am not an Arabic speaker. Um, so this is basically stewed flava beans, which are broad beans, and it's typically seasoned with a little ground cumin, finished with extra olive oil. And in Egypt, they serve it with warm pita bread and then sometimes jazz it up with like lemon juice, fresh veggies and herbs. And I got this all from the website called The Mediterranean Dish. All the links to everything I talk about will be in the show notes.
Oh, you're amazing.
It
I
sounds
had that when I was in Egypt, and it is so good.
okay. So yeah, I was like, oh, she probably had this because I think it said, I don't know if it was Egypt's national dish or just a really popular dish
Very
there.
common. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
It sounds really, really good. So yeah, you make it with a skillet and they warm it up with salt and cumin. You use a potato masher to mash the beans. And then with a mortar and pestle, you have hot peppers and garlic. And then you add the hot peppers and garlic to beans. And then you have pita bread, and you can put sliced veggies in it, olives. Oh, this sounds freaking delicious.
So good. You're making me hungry.
I know. I was like, oh, this sounds so good. So then to go with that, we have our drink of the week, and our drink of the week is called salab. And this is an Egyptian hot creamy drink. And this is also a vegan drink too. So it's also very popular apparently in Turkey. It's 1/4 cup water, 1.5 tablespoons of corn flour, 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 tablespoon, sorry, 1 teaspoon of rose water, and cinnamon powder and crushed pistachios, which also sounds really good. There is, when I found this, I was like, I have to mention this. I live in New Jersey. There is a Persian restaurant in Morristown, New Jersey, and they serve rose water ice cream.
Oh,
It's really
amazing.
The first time I went there, I was like, I'll try it. It was so good. I have to go back because it's like
Wow.
problem. It's so good.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, I don't eat ice cream, but like a rose water gelato would be so good.
That sounds really good.
Doesn't that sound amazing? I'm gonna have to find out. I'm writing myself a note to find out how to make it.
I know there's got to be a way.
There has to be. Yeah.
Anything
So
with
good.
anything with rose water is good. Anyway, so those are our two dishes. So this is a point of the show where I tell you that if you are enjoying what I'm talking about, you can follow me on anywhere you get your podcast. You can subscribe. You can leave me a 5-star rating if you really like the show. And you can follow me on any socials. I'm Dine with Divine on Instagram. And if you want to follow me personally, I'm Sankofa HS, SANKOFAHS on Instagram. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions for the show, you can always email us at dinewiththedivinepod@gmail.com. And at the end, we're going to go into all of Joya's stuff so that you can follow her too. Now we'll get on to our next topic. So this part of the show, I like to call it like tea time. So we kind of do like a little educational thing. So I looked up a bunch of stuff. Everything I looked up, and I was reading about you, and you mentioned earlier that you do a lot of work with Mary Magdalene, or that you really enjoyed working with her.
Yes.
So I went on this deep dive on Mary Magdalene, and my God, I was shocked.
You're talking about my favorite subject.
Okay, awesome. This is so exciting. I furiously started texting my friend who is very Catholic. But she's a very cool Catholic. She's very liberal. And I was like, did you know that Mary Magdalene wasn't even a prostitute? And she's like, yes, Ashley, everybody knew this. And I was like, oh, great. I was like, I guess I have the last.
Everybody knows.
I know. Yeah. She didn't actually say that, but the way she's like the nicest person on earth. But in my head, I'm like, she thinks I'm dumb, but she didn't. She's so sweet. So basically, I found out that Mary of Magdala, which is like, technically where she was from is called Magdala, and it was a town near I'll find it in my notes. Just give me a minute. Anyway, that's the town she's from, if you didn't know, because I didn't. She is extremely misunderstood, and there's a lot of things. We're going to go into it right now. So this is a quote from an article in the Smithsonian Magazine that I found. It's called Who is Mary Magdalene by James Carroll. So I'm just going to read this quote, and then we're going to talk more. So here we go. It starts with, from the New Testament, one can conclude that Mary of Magdala, her hometown, a village on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, was a leading figure among those attracted to Jesus. When the men in that company abandoned him at his hour of moral danger, Mary of Magdala was one of the women who stayed with him, even to the crucifixion. She was present at the tomb, the first person whom Jesus appeared to after his resurrection, and the first to preach the quote-unquote good news of that miracle. These are among the few specific assertions made of Mary Magdalene in the Gospels. From other texts of the early Christian era, It seems that her status as a quote apostle in the years after Jesus' death rivaled even that of Peter. That prominence derived from the intimacy of her relationship with Jesus, which according to some had a physical aspect, including kissing. Beginning with the threads of these few statements of the earliest Christian records, dating to the 1st through 3rd centuries, an elaborate tapestry was woven, leading to a portrait of Saint Mary Magdalene, in which most consequential note that she was a repugnant prostitute is almost certainly untrue. On the false note hangs the dual use to which her legend has been put ever since, discrediting sexuality in general and disempowering women in particular. So I read more into the article and I'll read more stuff later, but the first thing that made me angry, which is multiple.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
what? So the first thing that made me angry is that, like, okay, let's talk about the first thing, is that there's mad Marys in the Gospels. So there's multiple Marys. And they talk about in the article how Mary Magdalene, like the Gospels, which are the first 4 books of the New Testament.
The canonical Gospels.
Exactly. Yes. This is why I was like, I can't wait to talk to you about it because you know this way better than me. This is great.
I love that you know this and you're bringing it up. I'm so happy.
Okay,
I had
good.
no idea what we were going to talk about. This is so awesome.
Good. That's why I like it to be a surprise. But I was like, okay, she knows a lot more about this than me, so we'll have a good conversation. So they were written like 35, some 65 years after Christ was resurrected. So the thing is, if you think back 35 years, I'm like, oh, my memory might be a little hazy of what had happened. Now, it's not that everyone's memory, they didn't know what happened, but like I said, there's like 5 Marys hanging out. I'll tell you, hold on. We have Mary, who's Jesus's mom, everybody knows, Virgin Mary. Then we have Mary of Bethany, who is the sister of a different Mary and Lazarus. Then we have Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. And we have Mary, the wife of Clopas. And I don't know who Clopas is, but that's fine. She's somewhere in the Gospels. So because we have, and then we have Mary Magdalene, because there were so many Marys, they kind of mixed up some of the stories, and when we read it, we don't know which Mary sometimes they were really talking to, because when they wrote everything down, their memory wasn't as clear as it was when it initially happened. So a lot of things kind of got mixed up, and then Mary Magdalene's story kind of got mixed up in everybody else's story. So that's just part of it. Like, there's a way more, but it's like, so we don't know purely like her line of what exactly happened with her, except for certain things we do know. She was the first person to see Jesus after he resurrected, and we know she was the last one to leave because she was a ride or die. She was like a friend, like no other. So the other thing is also, if anybody is listening to this and you guys don't know, when they made the Bible, there was tons of books in the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
There was mad books, and we might just have an episode about that because it's wild, guys. There was mad books, and they had to pick and choose which ones were going to be part of the official Bible. And that was Constantine, I think.
Correct, in the year 325.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Oh my God. I'm so bad with dates. Thank you. You're the best. I only remember people. I never remember dates. So yeah. Oh God. Joya, you're so great. Okay. So yes. So Constantine, he had a council, correct? Right?
Yep. The Nicene Council.
Yes. The Council of Nicaea. And they all decided which books were going to be in the Bible. Now, remember, there's 2 things at play here. More than 2 things, but 2 big things. Number 1, we have to politically decide what's going to be in there, because we can't have people thinking they're too free, especially not ladies. You know, we got to suppress the ladies a little bit. We can't do that. And also we have to pick and choose what we want to translate, what sounds right to us. Oh, and that brings me to the second thing, translation. A lot of things were not okay. For instance, there's words in our language that maybe if you went to, I don't know, Mongolia, they don't have a word for, or they have words that we don't have words for. So we end up changing those words. Oh, very good example is right now I'm teaching like a course on ancestor reverence. And the way we speak about ancestors in the Western world, we say worship, but it's not worship that you're trying to do. It's reverence, saying like, oh, we revere these people, we respect them. But we don't have a proper word like they do in some cultures to describe how they treat their ancestors. So when early Christians went to these cultures, they're like, oh, they worship dead people, but that's not what they were doing. They made altars because they're like, no, these are people who have died and they're closer to our creator than we are. So we just respect them. So it's that kind of thing. So when they had to translate the Bible, they had to translate it for political reasons. They had to translate it for what was going to work best for them. And then sometimes the translations weren't that great. Like,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was translated from Aramaic to Greek to English.
yeah, hello, right? And then later on, every 500 years, I think they say a language completely changes. So now you've translated it from 3 languages. Now you keep going, keep going, keep going. Then they translated probably to Latin because, back then everybody was speaking Latin in the medieval times. There was only certain people, remember, back then who could even read.
Right.
So because of that, everybody kind of got to say what they wanted. Like, oh, this is in the Bible. Oh, this is in the Bible. Like, well, because everybody couldn't read it. So anyway, this is the story of the Bible. So things got really muddied, right? Okay. So we find out later on also, Mary had a whole book.
Yes.
Yes. So let me find this in my notes because it was fascinating. There was a whole book for Mary, but then they kind of just didn't care about it. Like I said, there's a bunch of books they didn't add into the Bible, some stories.
Definitely not the one from the female apostle. That was not getting in there.
No, they said pardon.
We're taking that out and we're putting a prostitute instead. Yeah.
Absolutely, because like what's easier? And then so there's a part in the Mary's part of the Bible where I can't find. Oh, well, what Mary says, she's talking to Peter. All right, Peter's one of the other apostles, and
she's jealous apostle.
Oh, hello? Okay, I didn't even know. So Peter was like, okay, so Peter says to Mary in this line, he says, sister, we know that the Savior loved you more than all other women. Tell us the words of which the Savior that you remember, the things which you know that we don't because we haven't heard them. So Mary responded, I will teach you about what is hidden from you. And she begins to speak all these words. So Mary starts, she had a vision. She's telling everybody, you guys, Jesus told me some stuff. It was wild. Let me tell you. Guess who gets mad like you just said? Peter. Because Peter's like, wait a minute. Are you telling me that Jesus liked you better than us? But then I think it was Simon. Yeah, I think Simon was like, wait, Peter, shut up. Because all she's doing is just, if Jesus told her something worth of value, why can't she talk? Why are you getting mad? But Peter was mad. You bitch ass. It's okay. So, sorry, no, I'm not trying to be rude, but he gets really mad. And then goes on to talk about all these other things, but kind of starts leaving Mary out of the narrative, which is not fair. Hold on. There's so much here. I have to just talk about this other thing. So anyway, so they leave Mary out of the narrative. They get rid of her book. Actually, her book turned up in like an Egyptian market in the late 1800s. I think it was 1895. And they found it, but it was all tattered. So they tried to retrieve it and translate it, and they have it. There is somebody who made a translation of it, so you can find it. But again, they didn't include that in the Bible for obvious reasons, because they were not going to say that there's a woman who was allowed to be at that level with the apostles. And they talk about in this article how there was actually a lot of people who were Jesus's friends. They just kind of settled on the number 12, but they were like, he had a lot of men and women who were his friends who like hung out with him and really supported him. Yes. And so then we get to the part about the prostitute thing. All right, there's a couple things going on here. There's a part of Jesus's story where they talk about how he had some female attendants, and each of the female attendants, he cast out demons from them.
Right.
But those demons, and they talk about, could have been physical ailments. They didn't necessarily have to be moral ailments. But in order to, again, suppress women, they have to boil them always down to the sexual part of them. So
Right.
they're like, oh, she had a demon. It must have been because she was a whore. Like, no. Like, some of these people may have had illnesses, even something like a mental illness, maybe depression, things like that. And he healed them from that. But everything had to be boiled down to her sexuality, because how dare she be a more complex being than just being sexual. And the the other thing that makes me incredibly angry is that with all of this, you think like the church had such a chance to be liberal and to be, you know what I mean? Like such a chance to show that like women could be so many things. But instead they were like, no, 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 no. Because we don't want the ladies to think for themselves, and we don't want them to want to be the pope or be priests. And it's almost just silly, and it's sad because this is thousands of years now of like the patriarchy in Christianity that has affected so many parts of the world that could have been so different. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And so my trip that I went on to Egypt
Mhm.
was actually on a spiritual pilgrimage following Mary Magdalene,
Mm.
because she was a sent priestess. She was a miraphor, which is
Mm.
why the story in the Bible of her washing Jesus's feet in the oil with her hair, and they all got angry because how dare she use a whole jar of alabaster jar of oil on his feet? Who is this woman? Because and what she was doing was anointing him, because spikenard is the oil that ushers your soul to the other side. And so since they
Wow.
knew he was going to be crucified, she was anointing him for his upcoming journey to the other side.
Yes.
And so, she actually studied in the temple of Isis with
Mm.
the goddesses or the priestesses who studied sound. There were sound healers who studied in Egypt. There were scent priestesses who studied in Egypt. They
Mm.
were very revered women back in those days. They were healers, and they studied at Alexandria. And so these women were very powerful women. They were very powerful women. And Magdala, where Mary Magdalene was from, was actually a rebel's port. I don't know if you read that part in
I
there.
did not.
Yes, it was where all of the outliers and rebels went who were rebelling against the government, who were like, they were fighting back. And so, of course, Jesus wound up there because Jesus was a rebel. He went to
Yes.
start a revolution. And his revolution was teaching people to awaken. He was teaching
Mhm.
people to get in touch with God within themselves, that they have this power in them that they all have access to. Um, a lot of people believe that he and Mary Magdalene were actually married, and that there's a
Mhm.
child who came out of that wedlock. Mary Magdalene actually fled persecution after Jesus's death, and she went to France.
Mhm.
And so you can go to the caves there where she was, and there's lots of churches there dedicated to her. And ironically, it's actually where they believe that Mary Magdalene was not a white woman, which of course she wasn't. They were in the Middle East, so hello, but that they have the Black Madonna there. So
Yes,
and a
yes.
lot of people believe that she actually originated from Ethiopia, that she was an
Wow.
Ethiopian priestess who traveled up to Egypt and to study in
Mhm.
Egypt. Yeah.
Wow. That makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me too.
Yeah.
Makes complete sense to me. Makes perfect sense to me.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's oh god. It's just fascinating because I'm like, after all this time, we're still not telling people this. I was like, nobody knows. Like, I mean, people know obviously, but like this isn't widely known stuff unless you look for it, right?
Right.
Yeah, or
Exactly.
somebody like Joya who knows about this stuff. Like if you don't,
Because I've
or
been
my
studying
friend
it for a
Jillian.
long time. And
Exactly.
there's actually a church window in Scotland that was I think the church was built in the 1700s, that depicts Jesus and Mary as husband and wife, and she's pregnant.
Interesting.
right? Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
telling you, there's a lot.
Yes.
It's just it's so controlled what they want you to know, but like there's so much. If you just dig a little bit, now that I've done a little bit, like not compared to what you've done, but like done a tiny bit of research, I was like, wow, this is crazy.
It opens up a rabbit hole of all of this information, and it does make you angry. It's like, all of this information has been so suppressed, and the power of women and the power of sacred sexuality and the power that women
Hmm.
have to, that we are the activators of the men. We need each other, right? We need the divine feminine
Yes.
and the divine masculine. And that, like, like when I was in Egypt, and they were talking about Queen Nefertiti, that she was the favorite wife because of the fact that she was so enlightened and so wise. So the king relied on her so much for her wisdom because she imbued it to him just by the very nature of who she was. And
Yes.
that's what women do. That's exactly what we do, is imbue other people with the vibration of who we are, and men pick it up by osmosis of the women that they're around.
Perfect. Thank you. You're very good at
Yeah.
speaking. This thing, the way you say things, it's like,
It's my
yes.
passion. I love this topic.
I'm so
I love
happy.
this topic. Yeah.
Yes. And yes, everything you said, yes. And then also there's like another reason it's also in this article that I read, they talk about the reason they wanted to kind of sexualize her or make her seem like, and when I say sexualize, it's not in a good way. They wanted to make her seem like she was a degenerate or something. That because sex is bad, I guess, to them because they want to be weird about it. But like
Right.
yeah, I'm like, sex is fine, but whatever. Okay, I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole right now. But also because Jesus was so, he respected women so much, and he never looked at them as like I said before, he had all these followers and friends. They were women and men. He didn't treat them different because some were men and some were women. He didn't care.
Yeah, no. And he was an Essene, right? He was from the Essene culture. And so in the Essene communities, men and women were totally equal. They
Hmm.
all sat around having intellectual discourse and talking about things and learning and studying the ways of nature. They actually were followers of what they called the way. And
Mm,
they knew things that we now verify, of course, with science and with psychology. Like, they knew to keep your mind and your thoughts occupied and busy and focusing on things. Otherwise, the mind left on its own just runs amok, and it starts
yes.
believing itself instead of, you start telling yourself a story and believing that story rather than you consciously telling yourself what you want to think.
Hmm.
And that's a totally different vibration, right? And so Jesus actually came from that culture. He was an Essene. His parents were Essenes. And
Mm,
so it's, and that's why he met Mary the Magdalene, because she was a priestess. She worked in the same kind of field of energy work. Yeah.
yes. Okay. I love this. But okay, so everybody, this is my thing. If you don't know all this stuff, please look it up. Like I said, I have two articles on there. One's from the Smithsonian and one is from somebody who is a doctor of, I think, religion in Canada. I found a really good article that she wrote. So there's tons of information about this out there if you're interested in reading more about Mary Magdalene. Um,
Dr. Elaine Pagels, also Pagels. She's phenomenal. And she's the one who interpreted the books of the Nag Hammadi scriptures. So she helped with the interpretations of those books that were found in Egypt. So she's, oh my gosh, she talks about Mary Magdalene so much. And um, what the misappropriation of women,
mhm.
period, who, how, the power of women and how we were persecuted is and put down and murdered for
Yeah.
being witches,
Hmm.
for being midwives, for being stewards of nature. So
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so after this is done, I'm gonna get the spelling for that, and I'm gonna put a link to that person's page in there too, so you
Awesome.
guys can look stuff up. Okay, so because I wanna honor your time too. We're gonna move on to our last topic here. So in this podcast, what I'm gonna do is tell you a story, and because you went to Egypt, we're gonna talk about Isis and Osiris. This is
Woo!
yes. So this is a story, and you may know the story. A lot of
I'm
people know.
wearing a goddess Isis necklace.
Ooh, Yay! I'm so glad this is okay. This is fantastic. I'm so happy. Okay, I'm so happy this is working out. Okay, so all right. So you may have heard this story, and there's different versions of this story everywhere, but this is the story, the version that I like, and I kind of put different parts in it, but I also put links to there's a big version of it on this podcast I listen to called Mythology. So there's links in the show notes to that too. So we'll talk about this is a story of Isis and Osiris. Well, this is a story of everybody, a lot of the Egyptian gods. So you're going to see how this goes, okay? And here we go. So in the beginning, there was nothing, okay? Nothing. And yeah, there was nothing. And then we have Atem. So there was a god named Atem, and he created himself out of literally nothing. So here's Atem walking around, and then he got bored one day, and he's like, I think I need other gods to hang out with, and I have none. I'm so bored. So Atem created two gods, Shu and Tefnut. Shu and Tefnut, Shu is a god now of air, and Tefnut became the goddess of water. And as was the tradition in Egypt, and you see it go on and on and on, we have brothers and sisters that get married and have kids. But at this point, there's only two people. What are you going to do? They kind of have to. So they got together and they had two other kids. So they had Geb and they had Nut. Geb is the god of the earth. Nut is the god of the sky, goddess of the sky. So at this point, Atem's watching his kids and his grandkids running around, and he's like, oh my God, I'm so happy. I love them so much. So great. So here we go. Atem's tearing. And all of a sudden, I don't know, he's a god, so his tears create people. Great. This is awesome. I can't even. So now he has people. And the people are walking around and they're having a great time and everybody's fine. But then Atem got pissed off because he's like, you know what? These people aren't worshiping me the way I thought they were gonna. He's like, what's going on? I thought they were going to be creating temples and giving me offerings, and they're just down there laughing and they're not talking to me. So you know what? I've decided I'm going to torture them. Like, okay, bro, that was a lot, but okay. So he gets his granddaughter Nut, who's the goddess of the sky, and he's like, Nut, you're going to do something for me. You're going to make the sky so clear, and you're going to make my rays so powerful that it's just going to burn people and dry up all the water. Nut was like, I really don't feel like doing this right now. And he's like, well, you have to, because you're my granddaughter and I created myself out of nothing, so you better do it. And she's like, fine. She's like, okay, fine. So she does it. So she's doing this for a while. She's like, I really hate doing this, but I'm doing it. And then after a while, Atem then gets mad at Nut because he's like, whoa, Nut is like super powerful. And one day she could maybe have kids that are more powerful than me. So he's like, okay, Nut, I have a decree. You can't have kids on any day of the year. And Nut was like, what? That's so weird. Okay. So he's like, yep, that's what I'm telling you. And that's the rule. So what did Nut do? She's the goddess of the sky. She's like, I think I'm just going to make more days. So she did. She's like, I'm just going to make more days. So she made 3 more days. So on the first day, she had a little baby boy, and his name was Osiris. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all the gods heard a voice. They don't know where this voice came from. And it said, this is the Lord of all, and he's going to be a great and loved king. Nobody knows where this voice came from. But now Atem is scared because Atem has never heard this voice. He doesn't know what's going on, but he realizes, like, ooh, Osiris might take over from me. But I'm just not going to worry about this right now. So then the next day, she had 2 twins, Isis and the Bethead. So Isis and the Bethead were complete opposites in every way. Isis was loving and kind. She's the goddess of magic, the goddess of nature, of healing. The Bethead didn't really care about anything. She was kind of just into herself. She wasn't really bad, but she just didn't care. Like, she wasn't really into anything. She's like, whatever, I'm just here. I'm also a goddess, which is cool, but I'm just like, whatever, I'm for myself. So then on the 3rd day, she had another baby, and this baby's name was Set. And Set was kind of a jerk. He loved to play tricks on the other gods. he loved to run around and just cause chaos all the time. And everybody knew this, but they just kind of let him do it because they didn't know what else to do. And he's a god. How much can you do? So, again, as was the custom, Osiris ended up marrying Isis, and the Bethead ended up marrying Set. Because Osiris also was super, super sweet. Again, the opposite of his brother, Set. And so they got married. Now, life is going on. And because Isis is such a sweet and good person, and so was Osiris, they both really hated the fact that Atem was torturing people. He's like, there's no reason for this. Like, this is terrible. So one day, Isis is just chilling, like in the palace or wherever. And the Bethead was like, hey, Isis, I heard some tea. And Isis is like, what is it? And she's like, great grandfather has a secret name. And she's like, what? He's like, yep, he has a secret name. And if you say it, something's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. She's like, but I heard stuff goes down if you say it. So Isis is like, well, what is it? And she's like, I don't know. You have to ask him. Isis is like, fine. So Isis gets to thinking, maybe. Isis is super nice, but she also is sick of people being tortured. So she's like, maybe if I find out the secret name, I can get him to stop torturing these people. Fine. So at this point, Atem's kind of old. So he has to cross the sky day and day night from east to west, east to west, east to west. Every day. He's tired. So one day he's like going across the sky and he drools a little bit. And I guess God drool is like super powerful. Because Isis, she goes and collects some of it and she makes a snake. So she goes to see her granddad. He's like resting because he's so tired of being the son all day. It's exhausting. And she's like, hey, granddad, what's going on? Great grandfather. And he's like, oh, I'm good. What's up? And she's like, hey, yeah, how's your day? He's like, oh, it was fine. Oh my God. And he starts screaming. What's going on? The snake bit him. Now he's screaming, Isis, you gotta help me. You gotta help me. Oh my God, I'm so scared. Oh my God, the snake bite hurts so much. And she's like, I'll help you, but you gotta tell me your secret name. And he's like, what secret name? I don't have a secret name. And she's like, you sure do. Tell me and I will help you. I promise I will heal you. So Atem thought about it and he's like, I can't tell you. So she turns around and walks away and he's like, no, wait. I'll tell you. He tells her and he's like, okay, my secret name, it's not really a name, it's a sound. She's like, I don't care. Just tell me what it is. And he's like, it's Ra. And she's like, and then all of a sudden, all of Atem's powers go to Isis. She feels it. Atem loses his powers. He's still God, but he loses his powers. So now Isis has all these powers and she's like, oh my God, this is great. So she goes to Osiris and she's like, Osiris, we're going to clean up shop. We're going to fix the people. I'm going to get them medicine. And Osiris is like, great. I'm going to help them make wheat and stuff. Like, let's do it. So they get on and they start making stuff for people and trying to help them. Okay. Now, at this point, they've been doing this for a little while. And now this is going to be a weird interlude to the story, but we're going to come back to it. So just stay with me. You're going to be like, why are you telling us this? Okay. So one night, Osiris is telling Isis, oh my God, I made this thing. It's like a drink, but you use like wheat, but it's fermented and like it's really cool. And I'm going to go show the humans. And Isis is like, fine, I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed. You can go show the humans. I'll see you in the morning. She goes to bed. Wakes up in the morning. Nibethet is on her couch. And she goes into Nibethet. She's like, hey, what's up? Why are you here? She's like, oh, I slept here last night. And she's like, what? And she's like, yeah, I slept here last night. Me and Set got in a fight. So I came here and I gotta tell you something. And she's like, okay, what? And she's like, I slept with Osiris. And she's like, what? She's like, yeah, like, you know, he was showing me this drink thing that he made and he was acting all goofy. And then he kind of thought that I was you because we're twins. And then I just let him think that and then we had sex. And she's like, what? So she's like really mad. But Isis, also being the goddess of compassion, was like, okay, Osiris didn't know it was you. He thought it was me. So I can't be that mad at him. I'm kind of mad at you, but you're my sister. So I'm gonna get over it. So she did. Again, that's a weird interlude, but it will come up again. So now Osiris, he just left for 10 years. He decided to go to other countries. Yes, I know, this is so random. It's like that morning he was like, you know what, I'm going to go across the world and teach people how to make wheat and bread and all this stuff. He's gone for 10 years.
On the road.
Yeah. He's like, I got to take my beer to everybody. My microbrew. I've got to advertise it. So he goes. And Isis is like, okay, cool. But she loves him and he loves her. It's not a problem. So Osiris is gone for all this time. And Isis is healing people. Osiris is bringing everybody wheat beer. And then he gets back. And all this time, also, Set is getting angrier and angrier. Because all the people of Egypt love Osiris. And they can't wait for him to come back. And Isis is ruling in his leave. And people really like her. So it's not a problem. But they just can't wait for Osiris to come back because he's awesome. So Set gets mad. Because he doesn't want everyone to like Osiris. He wants everyone to like him, but nobody likes him. So he amasses all these followers, and all his followers are kind of like seedy people, thieves, just mischievous people. And he's got a plan because he's like, let's see when Osiris gets back. I don't like him. I'm gonna figure this out. So Osiris gets back, and when he gets back, Set is like, Osiris, oh my God, I'm so happy you're here. And Osiris is like, oh my God, I'm so happy to see you. I gotta go see my wife though. I can't just see you. Like, I haven't seen her for 10 years. He's like, okay, bro, that's fine. But like, first, I set up a whole party for you. Please come. And like, I'll tell Isis, she'll come over. It won't be a big deal. Just come to the party. And Osiris is like, oh, okay, fine. I'll come with you. Gets to the party. The party is fun. The music is playing. The wine is flowing. Everyone's having a good time. Then all of a sudden, Set's like, oh, I forgot. You guys were going to have a contest. And Osiris is like, contest? This is weird. Okay, whatever. He brings out this beautiful box, gorgeous box. And Osiris is like, whoever can fit in the box perfectly can take the box. And Osiris is like, okay, cool. So everyone's trying. Some are too big, some are too small, some are too short, some are too tall. And then finally, Osiris is like, wow, this is kind of fun. Like, I want to try. And Set's like, no, you're the king. You can't try. It's not fair if you win the box. He's like, no, just let me try. It'll be fun. So Osiris leaves in the box, and of course, it's perfect because he made it for Osiris, okay? Now, lays Osiris in the box, and he slams it down, closes them in it, covers it with lead. Osiris is beating against the box, trying to get out, and even though Osiris is a god, apparently he can die in this box. I don't know how that works. This is Egyptian mythology. I didn't come up with it. So Osiris dies in the box now, and Set goes and he takes the box with his people and he throw it in the Nile. Meanwhile, Isis is like, she doesn't know what's going on, but she heard that Osiris got back. So she's wondering where he's at. So she goes and she finds Set and she's like, Set, what's up? Like, have you seen Osiris? And he's like, oh yeah, I saw Osiris. He dead. And she's like, wait, what? And he's like, yep, I killed him. And she said, what? And he's like, yeah, he's dead. I threw him in the Nile. I'm the king now. Sorry. Okay, bye. And then he runs away. And she's like, what? She's so upset. Yeah, she's really, really upset. So now she's like, oh my God. So now she spends the next 10-ish years looking for Osiris. Because she's like, look, I'm the goddess of magic. If anybody can bring him back to life, I can. I just got to find him. I don't know where he is. So she goes to this land called Byblos. It's in a different part of Egypt than she is. And she hears a story about a box that got stuck in a bush. And then a tree grew around the bush. And then they used that tree in the palace. So, long story short about the palace, she ends up becoming a maid. She gets in the palace. She breaks in. She gets the pillar and she leaves. We're not going to go into that story because it's too long. So anyway, just know she got it back. So she gets back the box. So she's traveling down the Nile with her box. Now, she gets back to her part of Egypt. So she's like, okay, I'm here. I got to get stuff for the ritual to bring back Osiris. But the thing is, Egypt has changed. In the past 10 years, she's been away looking for him. She's got to go kind of farther to find stuff. Meanwhile, Set has... Everybody hates Set. He's not a good king. but people are just doing whatever he does because he's the king. So Set has set out guards all over to monitor Egypt and see where Isis is going to be. So here comes Isis. Now she's looking for stuff, and they go back and report to Set. Isis is getting all these different kinds of herbs. I don't know what's going on. So what does Set go straight to her palace, and he sees the box right as Isis is coming back, and he's like, "Hey, Isis," and she's like, hey," and he's like, "What's over there?" And she's like, "What's over where?" He's like, "Over there. What's that box?" She's like, "What box?" And he's like, "Stop it. I see your box." She's like, "Set, stop. Like, let's just end this." He's like, "No, we're not going to end anything." So he takes out his knife and he starts cutting the box, and he cuts it into 14 pieces. And he specifically takes Osiris's penis, and he takes it and goes to one part of the river and he throws it in and watches alligators eat it, because without his penis, he can't have a baby. So Isis loses it. She starts screaming so loud that there's an earthquake in the world. Set leaves. He doesn't care. So after all this screaming, everybody heard it. So Nebehet came by and she's like, "What's up? What's going on?" She's like, "Oh, you're here to make fun of me?" Nebehet's like, "I'm making fun of what? I don't even know what's going on." She's like, so she tells Nebehet what happened. And she's like, "Oh God. All right, I'm going to help you." And Isis says, "You're really going to help me?" She's like, "Yes, I'm going to help you. We're going to go find..." Oh, by the way, Set took all the other pieces of Osiris and told them to scatter it all around Egypt so that Isis couldn't find them. So she's like, "I'm going to help you." So she's like, what we're going to do is we're going to make tracking dogs that can find Osiris anywhere in Egypt. Isis is like, "Okay, fine." So they do. So they spend a couple days. It doesn't take them that long. And they find all 13 pieces of Osiris. And what Isis thought was a good idea, which is a really good idea, she's like, what we're going to do is every single time we find a piece of Osiris, we're going to build a temple there for Osiris. Because that way, Set will never know where his whole body is. We'll confuse him. So Nebehet was like, "All right, sounds like a good idea. We're goddesses. We can make this happen very quickly." So they do it. So now they have all the pieces and they're putting them together. And all of a sudden, out of the woods, wherever they were, comes this boy with a dog head. Like, who's this boy? And the boy is like, "Hey." And then they're like, "Hey, you're a boy with a dog head. We don't know what's going on." And he's like, "Oh my God." And then Nebehet is grossed out. She's like, "Get away from me, blah, blah, blah." And Isis is like, "What is the problem? Why are you freaking out?" And she goes, "Oh, by the way, that's my baby that I had with Osiris that time." Everyone is confused. Everyone's like... Isis is like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, I had this baby, but he had a dog head and I don't like it. So I just threw it in the woods." And she's like, "Oh." But then, so she, at this point, Nebehet just leaves. She's just like, "I'm going home." I'm like, "Nebehet, you're not that great of a sister all the time. Sometimes you have to be nicer to her." But anyway, Isis felt terrible for this little boy with a dog head. And she's like, "Listen, I'll take you in. Like, you're going to be my assistant from now on." So she named him Anubis, and this was her best assistant servant, and he served her for the rest of her life. All right, that's another weird part of the story, but it happened. So at this point now, she put Osiris back together. She used oils, she used linens to cover him, oils, she rubbed them on his body, and she did certain rituals. So this is considered the first mummy. It was Osiris. And the box he was in was the first sarcophagus. So after this, she brought Osiris back to life. But the spell that she used, she said it could only work for a few minutes. So she brought him back to life. She held him. She was like, "Oh, they were talking. I love you. I love you. Love you." Oh, the other thing is, Osiris's soul could not go to where it needed to go unless it was whole. So basically, for some reason, they didn't need the penis part. That was fine. But the rest of his body had to be together. So She did it. It was fine. So she's like, all right, great. I'll get you alive for a couple minutes so I can talk to you. Then you can go into your spirit form and you'll be fine. So in those couple minutes, because he was a spirit and because Isis, I guess, is a goddess, she had a baby. She got pregnant and everything was great. So she got pregnant and she had a baby. And she named that baby Horus, and he had a falcon head. Now, she raised Horus and Anubis, and she raised Horus up because she wanted him to fight Set and like bring back their family's honor. And because Osiris was in spirit form, sometimes he could come back. And he was also training Horus. The other thing Osiris did was that the gods kind of felt bad for Osiris because he didn't like he got murdered by another god. Like it was too much. So they're like, we should give him like a good position. So they're like, Osiris, we have a vacancy. We need you to be the king of the underworld. And Isis was like, don't be the king of the underworld. That sounds like a lot of work. And he's like, no. I went to the underworld, obviously, because I'm dead. And it's a mess down there. He's like, basically, the only people who could go to like the cool part of the underworld were kings because they were kings. People who were just normal people weren't allowed to go because they couldn't be judged. And Osiris's job was to judge the dead. He's like, when I go down there, I'm going to judge everybody so I can pick who gets to go and who gets to come. But it doesn't matter if you're a king or a queen or a peasant. It doesn't matter. He made a list of 42 sins, unforgivable sins, and 10 of which are the 10 commandments, actually. And the other 32 are different. But the person who died would have to memorize those 42 sins and be able to speak them to Osiris when they died, and be able to say that they didn't do any of those things. And that's how he judged them on whether or not they got to go to the good part or they had to roam around forever dead. So she's like, okay, you're doing something good for humanity, so go be a king of the dead. Okay, cool. So anyway, now we get back to what we're talking about. So Osiris is teaching Horus to fight. And Horus is now getting older and he's ready. So Horus goes, he sets up a little bit of an army. He goes to Set and he's like, Set, you killed my dad? What's the quote from The Princess Bride? He said, my name is Diego Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Yeah. So that's basically what he did. So he went to him and they started fighting. And they fought for like 80 years. They fought for time. And at one point now, they're both exhausted. They're like, this is crazy. We got to stop. So Set was like, all right, I have a plan. This is what we're going to do to stop this fight. We're both going to become hippos. And he's like, we're both going to become hippos. And whoever can kill the other one under the water in the Nile will win. This is like, I love like mythology logic because you're like, how did they come up with this idea?
It's just so logical. It makes sense.
They're like, duh, we're just going to become hippos. So they're like, okay, fine, this sounds great. So they both became hippos and they went into the water. And for 3 months, they were under the water fighting. And then Isis got worried about Horus. She's like, oh my God, he's going to die under there. So she puts a giant hook in the water and she gets out Horus. And he's like, Mom, I almost had him. Like, damn it, Mom. So he's super mad. So she unhooks him and throws him back in. Then she gets another hook. And she hooks Set. And Set's like, oh God. He's like, I was dying. And then she's like, well, now I have you. I'm going to kill you. And Set's like, please, 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 please don't kill me. And Isis, again, being the goddess of compassion, is like, oh God, I can't actually kill you, even though I'm really mad at you. So lets him go. So then I guess they just had like a truce. Everybody stopped because this was crazy. So Horus comes up and Horus is like, Mom, how dare you do that? You had to kill him and you didn't kill him. And he gets so mad that he cuts off Isis's head. So now Isis is a headless stone. And because she's a goddess again, she can still talk. So she's talking. Somebody puts her head back on her body. And she's like, I'm going to turn myself into a statue because I feel terrible. And it's just so weird. So she does. So for a minute, Isis was a statue. Then the gods were like, please don't be a statue. We need you. You're the goddess of healing. Like, everyone's going to be sick without you. So she comes back. But now there's just general strife. Everyone's mad at everybody. They don't know what to do. And they're mad at Horus more than Set. They're like, why did Horus try to kill Set? Blah, blah. So all the gods, Atem gets all the big gods together and he's like, okay, we're going to have a meeting about what we're going to do with Horus. And they decided that Isis couldn't be part of the meeting, but Set could. And she's like, damn it, because Set's going to make it sound like Horus is the terrible one after what he did. So they had it on this specific island, and Isis turned into a bird, and she went to this island to spy. But then she's like, you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to turn into a very pretty lady. So Set's waiting outside where they're having the meeting, and she turns into this beautiful woman. She's just walking around, and he's like, oh, excuse me, ma'am. How you doing? She's like, oh, I'm so sad. I'm so upset. And he's like, what happened? She's like, well, my husband was this really good man and we had a farm, and then my son took over the farm and he was doing a great job, and then his uncle came and his uncle took everything, and like I don't know what to do. And Set's like, well, his uncle sounds like a jerk. You should kill the uncle and let the son rule the farm. And she turns back into Isis. She's like, ha ha, it is I. Isis. See, you want to be king, but Horus should be king because you're the bad one, and we're going to put Horus in. So then the whole council comes out and they're like, what's going on here? Isis is like, I just told him a story of basically what had just happened in our lives, and he admitted that Horus should be in charge and not him. And so the gods were like, okay, that's true. That's a good point. So they put Horus in, and Horus with the falcon head became the first pharaoh because he ruled over all Egypt. And then because Set was so bad, but they couldn't kill him because he's a god, they decided to put him up in the sky. And that's why he's the king of thunder, because he just gets pissed sometimes that he's still in the sky and he makes some noise. Yeah, exactly. He's just like, come to the sky. This is so annoying.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And then Isis lived to be very old, and then she died and went to the afterlife, and then she was with Osiris for the rest of her life, and everything was fine after that. And that's the end.
Bravo. I love tell stories. That was so entertaining.
I'm so glad.
I was like, I wish you were our tour guide on Egypt. We would have been like, oh my gosh.
Well, thank you. I tried. But that's our story for today. So we're coming to the end, unfortunately, of our podcast, and we've just had such a great time talking with Joya. So Joya, tell everybody where they can find you on the internet, or anything you're doing that you want to talk about. You can just tell us now.
Well, thank you. Oh my gosh, this has been so fun. And I'm actually found a recipe for the beans. I'm like, I'm going to go home and make some of those beans. I'm going to try to find those beans.
I know.
Find those beans. First, I have to find the beans. And then I'm going to make the beans. But thank you so much for inviting me. This has been so much fun. And you're such a great storyteller. It was so much fun to visit Egypt again like that. Your lens. It reminded me of a drunk history story, except for you're not drunk and you're a great storyteller.
Oh, thank you.
You're so welcome. Oh my gosh. So everybody can find me everywhere online at Vibology. It's VIBOLOGIE. And that's on Instagram, Facebook. My coach just told me I have to be on TikTok. She's like, you have to be on TikTok too. So I'm like, oh, it's another thing. So you can find me on TikTok and also YouTube. And I pretty much just share everything I know, every bit of my wisdom, everything that I've learned, I teach. And on my website, I teach and offer classes for I call it expressive and intuitive meditation for people who hate to meditate, because that coming into the self-awareness is the key, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't want to meditate. And I just read an interesting statistic that said that most spiritual people and spiritual leaders, only 17% of them meditate regularly. It's such a low number. So I'm like, well, we need to change that. People need to be meditating. They need to be in the body, learning who they are, right? Becoming in awareness. So anyway, off my high horse, I teach meditation for people who hate to meditate. And of course, I lead spiritual journeys around the world for people who want to come, women who want to come and sing and drum and dance and get in touch with our divine feminine priestess energy. And in so many places around the world, women were the drummers. You didn't even get into the story of Goddess Hathor, so I can't wait till you tell me that story. I'm like, wait, you didn't even talk about the Hathor. You just talked about Goddess Hathor.
That's coming up. Don't worry.
Good. I can't wait. I can't wait to hear how you tell her story. But it's her story, right? Not his story. Her story.
Yes.
Her story.
Yes.
But anyway, so yeah, I love to lead women on sacred journeys to go sing and drum and be in our wild woman bodies and just in that energy of that priestess energy and feeling that movement coming up from our sacral womb, up
Yes.
through the whole channel and through the throat. That's how we speak. That's where we speak from. That's where we find our power. And I'm
Yes.
so passionate about connecting women back to that source of their power. So yeah, you can find me everywhere at Vibology, and my website is also vibology.com. VIBOLOGIE.
Awesome. So like I said, every link will be in the show notes. And thank you again. And again, one more time, if you guys want to listen to the show, follow us on all the different Apple, Spotify, all that stuff. You can follow the show. You can email me if you have any suggestions at dinewiththedivinepod@gmail.com. And again, if you want to follow me, I'm Sankofa HS at Sankofa Healing Sanctuary on Facebook. And so I just want to thank Joya again. This was so great and fun, and she's been so patient. I had some technical difficulties, and she was very patient with me, and I just really appreciate people for just being so kind. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so
Thank
well.
you.
We are in Mercury retrograde, so
Yes. Okay.
I'm like, of course she's having some.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and then I will see all you guys next week.